we talked about the property sector, etc., to kick off with Chris. Now I think we're looking at a bit of change now. So it's great to be able to ask Jennifer up onto the stage, Jennifer Bryan, who ABChange Consultancy. And Jennifer is going to be talking about adopting Foresight into people-centric change. So before I take up all of Jennifer's speaking slot, Jennifer, would you like to come up on stage?
Thank you. What change is going on in your life right now, professionally or personally? And how do you feel about it? Are you scared, anxious, nervous, stressed, jubilant, really looking forward to it, excited? The exact same thing happens in a workplace change. Some people like the old ways. They're used to it. They don't have to think about it. It's automatic. It feels comfortable. Whereas others like the new ways of working because it's new, exciting, different. One thing I have learned living is that change is going to happen whether we like it or not. We're going to move home. We are going to change jobs. Our teams are going to get smaller. They're going to get bigger. Our organizations are going to go through a restructure. It might have been that once upon a time as leaders, we felt like we had a bit better of an idea of what might be coming down the road. And we felt comfortable with that. But now, I would argue, things are a bit more like this picture. They're moving fast, but there's a few rocks in the way. And although we can see a little bit down the line, we can't quite see around the corner. And that's what really gets us, because we know there's something. We just don't know what it is. And it's that level of uncertainty that actually, for many of us, paralyzes us to make decisions. I was reading one of Miriam Margolis's autobiographies, and very early on in that book, she said, and posed the question, isn't a certain level of uncertainty a good thing? And I was like, whoa. At that point, I was in the middle of this research project that I'm going to be sharing a lot of the findings with you today, and working with all these leaders who were really struggling with just that, uncertainty, and the level of anxiety and stress that was bringing them. So I sat there and I thought, isn't it a bit a good thing? And I was like, yeah, actually, it is, because I don't know about you, but I certainly don't want to know everything that's going to happen in my life or my loved one's life in every moment of the day or years. So it's about starting to feel more comfortable with that level of uncertainty, because it's not going to go away. It's just going to increase. So how can we do that? Well, first of all, we need to know, where are we going? What are we trying to do? Are we trying to get to Manchester or Paris? The difference is quite stark. So what do we want? And how do we want it? How do we want to feel about it? How do we want others to feel about it? And by others, I mean our clients, our customers, our staff, our peers, our colleagues, our family members. What is it that we really want? Now, that may seem like a bit of an obvious question, but I was working with a transportation organization, and they had spent millions of pounds at this point on a particular big change program. And they, at this point, brought me in because they thought, right, now we need to communicate and start helping people with this change. And so I read all the documents that they had, and there was reams and reams of documents on what it is that they have been doing. And then I met up with them for the first time. I said, this all sounds great, but what are you trying to achieve? What's the point of all of this? And they couldn't answer the question. When we are leaders in the organization, there are 3 different time horizons we always need to bear in mind. One is the actual longer term, because that gives us our future drivers. Once we know what it is that we want, that is much more about what is it that needs to happen right before we achieve that vision. Next is the midterm, and that gives us our growth as an organization. And then lastly, there is the near term, which is much more on the operational side. But I would argue, and time and time again experience has shown, that so many of us are constantly focused around the near term and give very little attention to the growth or the future drivers. And that's where we go wrong. Because how can we possibly make decisions now that are going to be right for us in the future if we don't know where we're going or what we're trying to do? So that is what this actual project wanted to take a look at. The problem statement was very much around, at the moment, change programs are focused on the hindsight and what is actually has happened previously. And then we're trying to take that learning and put it into a completely changing world. And we all know you can have the exact same change with the exact same people within the exact same organization, but you're going to get completely different outcomes. So we looked at how we can actually create this informed adaptability to make good decisions now that are going to actually inform us for the future, that are going to be right for us for the future. So I worked with Henley Business School of Management, and I wasn't by myself. There was representatives, obviously, with Henley, and a futurist, Steve Wells, and worked with Dr. Sharon Varney, who is an OD consultant as well. And what we did is we worked with several of the member groups. We asked for volunteers. So these organizations volunteered to take part of this particular research project. There was no obligation for them to do so, so it's completely volunteered, not voluntold from that standpoint. We wanted a mix of different organizations, so we had 2 public sector and 2 private sector organizations. And we did some kickoff workshops so that we could agree what the expectations are and what was going to be the rules of engagement in regards to how we were going to carry this out. And what we did is we had the kickoff workshop, and we at first said that we would engage once a quarter and have a bit of a check-in session. But that very quickly changed because the members realized they needed more than just once every quarter of the touch base with us from the tools perspective, which I'll go into in just a sec. So we ended up with check-in sessions on a monthly basis, and then on a quarterly basis, we'd have a longer reflection workshop with them. And that carried on for a year. And that was from December of 2021, which is when the kickoff happened, and we finished it off December of last year, 22. And so the first part of all of this was actually to get an agreed understanding of what is foresight. What do we mean by foresight? And it's not about having a crystal ball. It's not about predicting what's going to happen. It is about understanding the information that's coming in that we get every day and seeing how that may shape the future. What is actually going to happen from that standpoint? So we actually introduced a whole set of tools, 10 tools very specifically, around foresight tools, around planned people change tools, and emerging tools. And this was about forming a part of a toolkit for the different organizations to employ, not a to-do list where we tick off, right, I've done that one, tick, move on to the next, tick. It's not about that. It is about saying what's going to work within our organization. And that's how we presented it. So what did we find? What were the challenges? First challenge was very much around the priorities of the personnel in the organization. And you may ask, what was that about? We actually had an organization where within that course of the year, only one person was still there at the end as they were in the beginning. Everybody else changed. So the level of actual change that went on within the organization had a big impact on the change that they were trying to do. The other big challenge is that the short-term organizational structures and systems and processes also had a big impact on change. Because we were trying to actually put into place foresight, looking at those future drivers, the vision, what it is that we want, and then drawing backwards so that we make the right decisions today. However, there was a member who actually struggled with that because they were being assessed on an annual basis. And so trying to be assessed on an annual basis on something that's going to happen in a year when actually the outcomes and things are going to happen not till you're 2, 3, 5, 7 was really challenging because that's going to affect their remuneration. So the internal system and processes had challenges. Another one was the span of control and influence within the teams. So many of them were very comfortable talking to themselves in the change team, but they didn't feel they had the empowerment or the influence or the permission to actually go talk to other people. And the problem is with that, if you just keep talking to the converted already, you end up with a false positive with your change, and you don't actually end up influencing the change across the organization, which is kind of the point. Another one is there is very much a focus on the here and now, on the products and services of what's going on. And the thing is, wasn't a lot of focus about what is it that's going to need to change for people really quite soon as a result. So the big questions are, who are we and where are we going? That vision, what do we want? And then lastly, and this was a big one, and I have to admit, it was a real bugbear for me, and I had to learn to be very quiet as a researcher, which people who know me know I struggle with on a daily basis. And that is that people would choose many times what would be considered really the easy tools, rather than actually try and push themselves forward. Chris was talking earlier about how we actually need to go beyond and be bold. When we're looking at change and when we actually want to plan and change for the future, make the right decisions now, we can't just do what's easy. We've got to go a bit outside of ourselves and take a look at those other different challenging elements. So as a result, there was a bias and a lack of commitment to try those new things. And what we realized that people need a new mindset, because if we continue doing what we've always done, we're going to get what we've always got. By 2027, McKinsey reported, in the same report that Chris talked about, that 75% of the organizations back in 2018 are no longer going to, that were listed on the Standard & Poor's Index, are no longer going to exist by 2027. They will go bankrupt, be bought out, or die. So, call to action, repeating Chris's call to action, we've got to start doing something now. We can't keep putting it off. We need a different mindset. We need to look at the internal organizational DNA and how that may be helping and hindering us with the change. So the conclusions. The members felt it really helped aid the conversations going on within the organization. Starting to talk about this actually helped. Just getting it off the table and start discussing it. The other one is it really helped highlight those unspeakables, those things people think about but they don't actually say. And utilizing the tools helped bring that to the fore. The other is it started to create a much fuller picture of what's going on. Starting to take a look at what else is happening. What are all the influencing elements that are going on that actually we have no control over? Like the politics between countries. That has an impact on us. Legislation has an impact on us. It determines sometimes we start doing things one way and now we've got to do it completely differently. So it gave us that ability to do so, get that fuller picture. It helps us make decisions because we now understand all the different elements that are going on. So in order for us to be really futures literate, we need to start actually engage with it deliberately rather than passively. We need to use a range of methods to get to know and shape the future. And we need to practice, 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 practice. Because it's going to feel challenging. It's going to feel uncomfortable at first. But the more we do it, the easier and the better it will get. So when it comes to leading change with Foresight, it's about utilizing the holistic approach. And some people have heard me talk about that before. So I'm not going to go into huge detail about it, but it's about having that outside in and inside out perspective, looking at all the different influencing factors, like the politics internally and externally, like legislation, systems, processes, teams, people. Do we have the capability? Do we have the capability spread across the organization and we need to bring it into one place? Do we need to go and get that capability? Do we have the right systems and processes that are going to help us, or actually are they going to hinder us? The right culture, is that in place? What about the economic fluctuations, societal norms and adjustments? That helps us actually start to understand the fuller picture. Start to notice, take a look. What do you see? What are you hearing? And not just what people are saying, but what are they not saying? What's going on? Start to notice that, because all of that has an impact. Then followed by the ABChange model, which gives us as leaders an understanding of what it is we need to do and how we need to do it. And utilizing what I call the in-person and mind approach, which is that person who is the furthest away from the decision-making room. What are they thinking? What are they feeling right now about life? Much less potentially about the change. What's going on for them? Very, very short story, promise. And that is when I was working for an organization on a technology transformation. When I came on board, we were told there was a fear of technology. But when I went to the very first pilot session and to the friendlies, people who were really up for it, I noticed actually they didn't want to press the on button of the new device. And that's when I realized there wasn't a fear of technology in the organization. There was a phobia of technology in the organization, which is a totally different thing. And I had to understand, how am I going to help people who have a phobia, who don't want to actually press the on button on a new device? So I thought about my own phobia, which, long story short, and you can ask me later, is about rats. And there's a poltergeist reason why. But I thought, if there was a rat in this glassed meeting room, which is right by where I sat with the team, there is no way I would be on that floor, much less sitting where I would normally sit with everyone. So I started to think, what would it take for me to get to that spot, to be comfortable sitting outside that office with a rat in it? A heck of a lot of time, that's for sure. But it wouldn't happen overnight. It would be a phased approach. And that's what I realized what we needed to do for these people who had a phobia of technology. Using that in-person and mind approach is understanding where they're coming from and create a phased approach that would give them time to actually get used to the concept, the idea, before they actually have to start touching it. Edward de Bono says you can analyze the past, but you need to design for the future, because change is about people, not rocket science. Thank you very much, everybody. I'd be happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, on that. So, the pandemic, has that made it easier or harder for you to do change programs?
Actually hasn't really changed the effect of change programs, because it's much more about people and meeting them where they're at. The challenges, or the greater challenge, has been just like this, trying to get people, a whole bunch of people in a room. So when you want to do a kickoff, that can be a bit more challenging. But once that is done and everybody understands, there's so many different collaboration tools you can use online to get people working in groups, meeting and sharing different stories and experiences and so forth. However, you've got to be the type of person that really brings people out in the organization. If you've got 50 people on a call, the chances of you actually really touching each of those individuals is more challenging on a screen. And more often than not, they're doing what Kay and I started to write the other day, which is they're multitasking. And they probably won't have the camera on, or if they do have the camera, this, but you can see them doing this, and this, and this. So it's about making sure the engagement is still there when they're on screen as well as off.
So added complexities. Any questions from in the room? Dr. Osland.
I forget who came up with this kind of communications model, which was around you have people, big concept people, process people, and data people. And their kind of whole world revolves around, that's how they think of the world in those terms. And one might argue that a lot of facilities managers, people in the workplace industry, are process-led, data-driven. How do you convince them to be more people, and realize that that project, that workplace project, is about people, not about furniture and space?
I think it's about taking some of the lessons from Simone's books. So if you don't know, it's Simone Finton Jarvis. And that is, it's about being human. Many of us will meet up at a coffee bar with friends and family, colleagues and peers and so forth. We'll go to the bar, we'll go to the restaurants, whatever it may be. But it's just having that human connection with people, rather than hiding behind numbers and data. It's actually just treat everybody as human. They're not going to bite your head off. and chances are they're not going to start crawling at you like a cat will. It's just about meeting up with them as a person and say, hey, how's it going?
That is the danger of working from home when the cat comes up and does claw a lot.
I'm allergic, so I don't have that problem.
Right, any other questions in the room?
Hi, Jennifer.
Hello.
I really like the points that you were raising about setting that vision for the future and bringing your sort of clients and customers along for that, whilst sort of baking in that you can't over-engineer or over-predict what that might look like. I just wanted to sort of pick your brain really about how you go about determining your measures of success and how you will know that you've achieved that future state if you're accepting that there will be a bit of flex in what the end product might look like.
So
do that in 30 seconds if you can.
Sorry.
Right. So it's very much understanding the big picture of what it is that you want, and what that, because when you look at things from a long-term perspective, having an understanding, not drilling too far down into the specifics, allows that level of flexibility and adaptability. Where we get hung up many times when we're looking at a much more future vision of what it is we'll say, oh, we want to be the #1 consulting firm across the globe. Well, what does that mean? What is that about? What does that look like? We need to define it, what that's about for us. And then there's the flexibility and the adaptability for us to maneuver and change and make that work in different ways, because there's a whole bunch of different ways in which we can get there. You know, there's never one, to keep the cat thing going on, there's never one way to skin a cat. Yeah, it's about having that adaptability, but having the idea of where it is we're trying to go, and realize, right, at this point we might go from A to B to C, and then we go, ooh, actually now I have to go over to G and H, and then back to D, and that's fine. But if we are really fixed and rigid in our systems and processes, then it's a real challenge to go to G and H, and then back to D again.
Splendid stuff.
Yeah.
So we have, is it a very quick question at the back?
Sorry, thank you again for your presentation. That's brilliant. Thinking about ADKAR as a methodology for change and how sequential that is, what are the kind of challenges that you've experienced where people get a lot of comfort from those tick lists, kind of we've done this and then we move to this, as opposed to applying a toolkit methodology? And how do you overcome those challenges? Because I think people do get a lot of comfort from moving through the sequences, especially if change isn't every day.
They do. You're right. There is a level of comfort of being able to tick, and I'm love ticking things off my to-do list myself. But when it comes to change, there isn't just, as I said, a one-size-fits-all. And we're all going to have various different preferences. But beyond the preferences, there's going to be different things that are going to be appropriate for our organization and the people in which we're having to work with. And that's not going to be the same across the board. So that's why to-do lists are great. You know, I love them, but we can't approach people as a to-do list. You know, if we approach anybody who we know, whether our mother-in-law, our parents, our kids, and we're right, you're dressed, tick, have you brushed a tick, you know, school tick, you know, it just doesn't quite work that way.
Well, final question at the back.
So Jennifer, just a top tip to see if I can get that from you today, of in a world where the C-suite want tomorrow's change delivered yesterday, how can you persuade our senior leaders to dedicate the time necessary to human-centric change rather than just the processes being changed and not bringing the people along with us?
That's quite a big question.
That is not a 10-second answer.
No. But what I would say, just to be short and quick about it, is that the cost of actually not utilizing a human-centric change is massive. And that's why there's 70% change programs fail. And there's a load of costs that come out of that in McKinsey, and you can get from the reports and all the rest of it. So, and I would also take a look at the history of the organization and say, right, what change did you do before? And how much are people doing that now? Or have they just... That's the cost of a human-centric change. You've just lost your investment, because that's what change is. It's an investment. It's not a cost.
Thank you.
I hope that was the top tip. Thank you very much for that. Jennifer will be around for a while. So everybody, thank you very much to Jennifer.
Thank you.